What's up, everyone, and welcome to ClearTalk. So, today we are back, talking and giving an update to the events over in Israel, in Gaza, and giving an update to the ceasefire proposal and things like that. What has happened since our last talk about it. Um, and just going to go through, all that and what I think about it. And yeah, pretty much it. So, since the last time, the last time we talked about this, um, we had Joe Biden's uh, speech talking, giving the proposal that was supposedly Israel's proposal that was given, that they, agreed to and whatnot. Shortly after that, Hamas came out and pretty much said that they agreed to it. But then Israel turned around and said that they did not agree to it, and kept, and this kind of has went back and forth. Like arguing back and forth as to each other saying that they don't agree, or the other doesn't agree and whatnot. Because basically Hamas come back and said, well, we are not going to sign off on it uh, uh, until Israel agrees to it. And it just that back and forth continued going. And then because of that, then you had the Biden administration and the U.S. proposing at the UN the exact same proposal, putting it up to the Security Council at the UN to be voted on as a UN Security Council measure, and to try to, and what it appears to be in a way to try to kind of put more pressure on really both parties, but even more so Israel, because they are the ones that continuously come back saying that they don't really, or at least the rhetoric is that they don't agree with it, that they want the ability to continue the war whenever they're ready, in whatever in the future, because their ultimate goal is, rhetorically, is that they want to eradicate Hamas. And so the proposal was given to the Security Council, and it passed. So therefore, it would the Security Council measure was put into place. I think I think maybe all the security members, which is the U.S., Russia, China, the UK, and one other that I can't think of at the moment. There's five that are like, or well, there's five that are veto members. There's like 12 or 14 or something in all, but there's only five that are veto members. Superpowers that are veto members. So I think Russia may have like just sustained, but they didn't veto or go against it. So the measure went through, and that in itself puts a little bit more pressure on the whole situation. And basically it's like, I think I want to say it feels to me like Biden is trying to do this Weasley way of forcing something to happen without forcing it to happen. Like he is, and that seems to be like that seems to be his strategy this whole time. Or at least recently, I would say, not the whole time, but at least recently, when stuff's really started coming back on, like all this, the pressure from the societal and international pressure um, for a ceasefire or something to happen because of all the events that have been going on. I feel like he's felt more and more and more and more pressure to push and push and push for some kind of proposal to go through and the ceasefire to be made. um, and so I feel like he's here recently. He's continuously tried to. This is kind of a way I think of him being his sort of slick way of being diplomatic and sort of forcing a proposal by saying that the proposal was being given by Israel when and agreed upon by them when it probably wasn't. But when it's out there like that in the public, just thrown out there, it's like then you forcing them to have to turn around and be like, no, that's not what we said. We don't agree with that, and it kind of just makes them look bad. So it's like so he gives it with the expectation that they're going to actually like be like, oh my gosh, they're pulling our arm. We have no use but to say, okay, yeah, we agree. Um, but Israel is just so damn stubborn that they're still not wanting to like completely agree to it. Um, but since the UN um, uh, vote and that being approved through the UN, anyways, now the UN has no force, no enforcement capability. It just puts a very strong international like pressure, like for that to be um, further measures can be taken, especially, and it makes it more available on the international stage for countries to then like put pressure on more countries to put pressure on Israel to do it. But they're still it's still solely up to them whether or not they agree or not, or whatever, do it or not. It just puts further pressure. But there's no enforcement uh, capability from the UN. Um, so anyway, since that happened, you had Hamas come out and basically they agreed, but they wanted it's what appears to be like um stronger wording on how like they wanted to make amendments to it, basically asking for stronger wording in the ceasefire portion. Because I think it's basically like it states in the first phase a lasting ceasefire. Um, and then in the second one, kind of like a permanent lasting ceasefire or whatever. So they wanted to like definitively say a full blown like ceasefire, permanent ceasefire. That's the way Hamas is kind of wanting. They're wanting the amendment to like put an amendment on there to kind of make it stronger language towards a actual permanent ceasefire. Because the way it was stated, they're saying that basically it's like, it gives this broad brush where Israel could just decide not to, they could renege on it, which I mean they could do anyway, but even if it's stated as a permanent, but it would make it even more like it would just make it more stringent on them to actually hold to a ceasefire if the language is stronger. I guess it's just like that weird language thing, which Israel more than likely will not agree to, but they haven't even really come out. It's like there's been some back and forth in that aspect, um, acting like they agree, like it's being said. Because then you even had Tony Blinken keeps coming out saying yes, they totally agree to it. It's Hamas that's not agreeing to it, whatever, which is exact opposite. Like that's not exactly, that's not at all the way, but then, because he's sitting there acting like Israel has agreed to it wholeheartedly. They, whatever, that it's done deal on them. They're not the problem. It's Hamas. Um, and that's not at all. When you've got Israel literally right to his left or right, whatever, right beside him, saying, actually, we don't completely agree to this. Because we want the ability to be able to, continue this if we want later on down the road. If we feel like Hamas has not been, basically, if they feel like Hamas has not been, eradicated or whatever, they want the ability to continue going. I mean, and because I think Israel's standpoint is that they want, like, because it states that the phase one, if it's a 6 week, period where negotiations will continue to get to the phase two, and if at the end of that 6 weeks, if the agreement or if the negotiations have not come to a complete agreement to start phase two, that as long as negotiations are moving in a positive manner, the ceasefire would continue. That's the continuous ceasefire part of that whole argument that's in there right now. In Israel, Netanyahu is arguing that he wants the ability that at the end of that 6 weeks, if negotiations are not going, or if the negotiations have not come to the phase two, he wants to be able to restart, the bombing campaign and go right back into it, the fighting. He wants that discretion to be able to go right back into it. And I think there's some in his cabinet are being like, well, I mean, yes, you can do that. You can just, you can go ahead and do that, which is the reason why Hamas is arguing the opposite. They want it to be definitive that, ceasefire will continue, ceasefire will be permanent. The whole lasting thing they don't agree with, because they, it's this, that's the back and forth there. It's like Hamas wholeheartedly wants a ceasefire, which, I mean, granted, you can understand why they would, but Israel does not. And that's been their thing from the get-go. Like, that's the reason why they constantly keep pushing back, and constantly, one minute you hear that they agreed to something, but then the next minute they're reneging on it, because they want the ability to, they ultimately want to continue the war. I mean, Netanyahu ultimately wants to continue war. He doesn't want it to actually end, because he knows that he's already in legal troubles before this war, and he wasn't popular, and he was already the people already wanted an election and for him to be gone in the first place. And I think that at this point they still very much want that to happen, but he's trying to hold on to power to keep that from happening, because he wants to stay in power. So keeping the war going is his best bet at staying in power and staying, as the prime minister. So he's constantly trying to find every way possible to sabotage the agreement. That's what's been happening, all along here, really. But they're continuously arguing that that Hamas is the problem. Hamas is saying that they're the problem, and that they, so it's always this back and forth thing. When I mean, it's obvious, and we see what's going on, and we know why it's going on. But in lieu of all of that happening, though, you had one of the most you had, and with this proposal on the table, like, this proposal was on the table already, before the UN portion of it came into existence. And like, the ability to get hostages back, without anybody else dying or whatever. If we just ceasefire, get hostages back safely, those who are still alive, and nobody else would have to die. In the lieu of all of that, looming in the air, you wind up having the IDF do an operation where they, and with the help of the U.S. Intelligence, go in and sorry. My that's crazy. Go in and try to. They had intelligence of 4 hostages being held in this like apartment building of sorts or something, and so they go in with this operation. They do some more probably minor bombing to try to get them in there. On top of that, they disguise themselves as medical personnel, or rather, not medical personnel, but aid workers. That's what it was. Trying to do, well, I guess maybe a mixture of both. But anyways, they disguise themselves so they don't go in as military people. They're disguised as like aid personnel in an aid vehicle, which is in itself a crime, a war crime, because you're not supposed to do something like that, because then you put at risk aid workers, other actual aid workers, by now they're going to think that any aid workers coming through could potentially be actual combatants, and so that puts all aid workers at risk. That's something that you're not supposed to do. So sorry about that. I know that probably made a big bump. And then, because after rescuing the 4 hostages, the vehicle for some reason will not start, or there was some kind of mechanical issue with the vehicle trying to get back out. So then they call in for even more bombing, and as massive bombing operation goes out to help them actually escape the area, which then turns around. All in all, you wind up with the last figures are around 270 something plus people dead, along with close to 700 injured, just to get these 4 hostages out, which was completely unnecessary. And not only that, I mean, they were dropping bombs and stuff and explosions, like in the middle. This is in the middle of the day, in the middle of like a shopping type of area, like where the people are trying to buy food and buy items that they need and whatnot, and they drop in, and these people are just they get bombs dropped on them and out of nowhere. So yes, you have 270 something people dead. Dozens of those are children, like 40 something of them or whatever. I think was the last figure I saw were children. Along with, like I said, up to close to 700 people injured. Completely overloading the medical, the hospitals nearby and everything else, which they already don't have the capability of helping people really, or very minimal capability of helping anybody. So yes, this is all to get 4 people out, and then on top of that, there were reports that potentially, and due to this happening, they potentially killed 3 other hostages, one of which was questionably an American hostage. Now, that report has not been, I don't think, like verified at the moment. I still not has not been verified, but that was reported. And then on top of that, there was even some report of somebody claiming that it was actual U.S. troops on the ground. Now, of course, we said that there wasn't, that this was solely. Now, I don't know if that was technically supposed to be at that area or if it was at the area that they were trying to evacuate to, because I believe they were using the pier area to get them out. So it could have very well been that there was some troops there potentially. Although, like I said, that we stated that we had no troops anywhere on the ground. But so you got all these conflicting things, but ultimately, like I said, you had innocent people die, 270 something innocent people die, 700 something injured to get these 4 people out. So they make an operation forcing to try to validate their reasoning of we can bomb our way and we can do these operations and be successful in getting hostages back. Like, that's Israel's argument that they've been trying to have for months now. And they've actually killed more hostages than they've actually rescued, even killing them, just outright on video, not realizing that they were hostages. All to do this to prove that they can do it this way and it be successful. If you call, 700 people injured and 270 some people dead is successful, instead of just accepting a proposal that would allow you to get all the hostages out and nobody die. So this is the problem with all of that. And it is so frustrating at this moment. Over frustrated at the whole situation. And that this is where we are still after months and months of this going on. But we've had other things, other things have come out that is continuing to put pressure on Netanyahu and the government outside of just the proposal. You wind up having one of the war cabinet members in Israel resigned, left, or whatever. That was Benny Gantz. There's 3 cabinet members. So basically you have Gantz, Gallant, and Netanyahu. Those are the 3 members of the Israeli war cabinet, which was put together. This was a cabinet of people that were put together to create this illusion of unity amongst the oppositions in the Israeli government, because they all oppose each other. And it was when this started, that was the point, was to show this illusion of uniformity in the government to carry out the operations needed to, of what all they've done since. But Gantz has been a hardliner on the kind of the day after thing question that Netanyahu just constantly ignores, um, and has no answer for, or well, is not giving the answer for because he knows that the answer is not what everybody wants to hear. Um, and so Gantz finally decided after all this time that he was no longer going to go along with it, and he basically bounced. Um, and is was calling for basically calling for Netanyahu to do he's going to pressure um, the government to do an election and whatnot to try to get him out. Although that's probably not going to happen right now, because even though he left and his portion or members of the part of his opposition party or group is not significant enough to take power out of Netanyahu's. Um, he still has a majority in their cabinet, uh, Congress like um, group or whatever. Um, so he still has the majority party. If Gantz did request for Gallant to do the same, to follow in his footsteps. So if Gallant was to do that and take his portion, you might potentially then have a power adjustment there that would put Netanyahu on the minority side, but I don't know. Um, but immediately after Gantz moved, then you had your real far right hardliners, uh, Ben Gvir, immediately requesting to be put on the war cabinet. As far as I know, that has not happened, and let's certainly hope that it doesn't happen. Um, and let's be clear, like they all are right wing. Like they're all in agreement on what's going on. Their biggest disagreements lies in how to accomplish and uh, bring an end to it, to the conflict. Um, Gallant and Gantz tried are a little bit more liberal conservative to the point that they want some sort of actual like resolution to it, um where and without like the complete destruction of Gaza, um or the Palestinians, and Netanyahu and Ben Gvir, Smotrich and stuff like that. They're on the side basically of, especially Smotrich and Gvir, on the side of just complete eradication. Like they have said that multiple times over. Um, that's their move. That's their motivation. Netanyahu kind of sits in the center of that, and that's what his problem has been, is trying to balance that out. But right now, his power, or keeping his power, relies on the Smotrich and Ben Gvir side, um, keeping him relevant by staying in and not going against him. So now you've got the potential here of him just actually buttering up on that side more than the Gantz and Gallant side. So, um, here there's no telling what's going to happen now. Going at least in the like near future, um, how he's going to decide things. So we're still in waiting on that. Uh, and you're still having, like I said, you had that major attack. There's still all the also smaller attacks going on. Um, so the bombing is continuous and won't, as it has been. but yeah, so that's pretty much the update on that. So you have Biden pressing the proposal through the UN to put pressure on um, on Netanyahu and Israel on trying to actually, accept this proposal, um, and Hamas at the same time. Uh, Hamas appears to be accepting it, although they do want stronger language. But I feel like they would more or less agree to it, even without that amendment, as long as Israel just agrees to it and says that they agree to it without any these other stipulations that they keep acting, like but we want the right to continue if we want to, kind of thing. Um, but anyways, so that's where that is. Um, you did have, I think, yesterday, the rhetoric coming from Biden has slightly dwarfed or changed in recent days, a recent week or so, a couple of weeks, but especially in the recent week, where he seems to be, I don't, getting a little bit more reasonable on the side of, especially with protests and things like that. Apparently, yesterday or the day before, he was interrupted by some protesters at I don't know where, but he was interrupted by protesters, and where he previously had been like, um, kind of pushing back a little bit on it, and still like pressing that Israel has the right and blah blah blah. Um, Apparently yesterday, it showed where he actually, and you always have the protesters say what they say, genocide Joe, whatever, and then the rest of the crowd have been like chanting, the 4 more years, 4 more, whatever. And he's been kind of like previously kind of backing that, like yeah, bringing the 4 more years, blah blah blah. But yesterday he actually flipped and more like suppressed the 4 more years chant. Saying like, hold on. Actually, they kind of the protesters are right. There are children, dying, and it is horrific and blah blah blah, and so they are right. We like he's had this weird sort of sympathetic vibe to the way he reacted, which is very different from what he's been recently doing or previously doing. Um, and that was after the whole UN, I believe, after the whole UN like push. Um, so I think he's really starting to feel the pressure. And maybe even potentially they've starting to see that they really do need to change some rhetoric and change some policy decisions, or to some degree, to save his campaign, because we all see it's going in the shitter because of all this. You even have the DNC putting out that they are putting a whole lot of like funding into multiple states, even like deeply red states, which doesn't really even make sense for them to do. But for some reason they're doing it. Whether it's that they see some potential in some down ballot stuff, maybe, or they're really just trying, or I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but there's something definitely happening there. So maybe they've seen the light a little bit and they're trying to drift. I don't know. We'll see what comes in the next days and weeks. I assume something major is going to happen before the debates. I would assume like something definitively is going to happen before then. Um, but I don't know. And then you have uh, the agreement of Netanyahu coming and speaking before Congress in July. Um, that is horrible. Um, you've recently had protests in Washington. I believe the number was somewhere around 75,000 or something. Um, Potentially, roughly in there. Um, that was massive. Um, and and hopefully when Netanyahu comes, hopefully it will be even larger. Like hopefully there will be, not just thousands, but maybe even millions show up, um, and maybe even prevent him from even being able to go. It would be great if he was even turned around and like, nah, bro, go back to Israel. Um, yeah, there's a lot. Last week you even had the report where it has been basically approximated, calculated that Israel has dropped about 75,000 pounds worth of bombs since October 8th, I guess. Um, that is massive. That's like more than I think all that was dropped in World War II. Like, it's a massive amount. Um, and the reason why the Gaza Strip is just decimated at this point. Um, lot of things like that coming out. Yeah, more and more reports of things coming out, things that where investigations have been made into stuff, and they're finding, um, you know, uh, things were not what were said as far as like the initial reports and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of that kind of stuff going on. But anyway, hopefully we will see something major happen within the next few weeks, and some change, especially after this UN resolution. But we'll see. So, anyways, thank you for joining me, and let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the proposal of the proposal. Let me think of or what the and that turned into a UN resolution. Do you think it's going to be effective? Do you think it's doing anything, or is it just dead in the water? Do you think all of this stuff going on, the breaking apart of the Netanyahu regime and stuff in Israel, the coalition there, is it falling apart? Is that going to cause is that going to cause a problem and force their hand to make changes? Will they agree to the resolution, and do we actually get a ceasefire? What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, it's been Clear Talk, and peace. I'm out.